It's Thursday, July 24th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Granthermes. Today on the show, we are going to be talking about Trump's brand new AI summit and the bill he signed to open the floodgates on cryptocurrency. And I'm just kidding. The only thing we are going to talk about today is the only thing worth talking about right now. And that is that Donald Trump is in the Jeffrey Epstein files. That was first reported in the Wall Street Journal and then backed up by reporting from the New York Times. I'll go through what they found, what we know and don't know right now, how Republicans and voters are reacting, and why the administration's next step might be partnering with a convicted sex offender to try and save the president. But first, make sure that you're following or subscribed to Make It Make Sense with Grant Herms or whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube if you're a watcher. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got brand new articles going up all the time, including I've got a brand new piece up about how Donald Trump is spending more time golfing on his own properties and cashing in off taxpayer money than his previous administration at this point. But it's $5 a month to get access to that and all the other bonus content I have up there. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod. All one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on Twitter and Bluesky and at Grant Herms TV on everything else. All right, let's get to today's episode. Hey, listener. You know what the show is all about breaking down the news in a way that actually makes sense. No spin, just real reporting and smart conversations. And as an audience, you're sharp, curious, and engaged. And I know that you value where you spend your time and money. So if you're a brand, an organization, or a cause that aligns with truth, trust, and just cutting through the noise, then we want to partner with you. Whether you're launching a new product, pushing a policy, or you just want to get your message in front of an audience that values insight over outrage, let's make it make sense together. For ad rates, sponsorship packages, and custom campaigns, you can email ads@matchbookmediapod.com. That's ads@matchbookmediapod.com. Because the smartest conversations deserve the smartest partners. Okay, let's get on with the show. All right, so on Wednesday afternoon, the Wall Street Journal released a story that was equal parts stunning and also kind of a no-brainer. It was that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files, and he was told that back in May by Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Here's what the Journal wrote. When the Justice Department officials reviewed what Attorney General Pam Bondi called a truckload of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein earlier this year, they discovered that Donald Trump's name appeared multiple times, according to senior administration officials. And in May, Bondi and her deputy informed the president at a meeting in the White House that his name was in the Epstein files, the official said. Many other high-profile figures were also named. In fact, the Journal says that hundreds of other names were on this list, though officials said the president was told that there was the belief that those names were maybe hearsay, and just being in those documents, I do need to say, isn't proof of wrongdoing other than having a close relationship with a prolific child sex trafficker for about 15 years. Now, the White House is calling this a fake news story and said it's just like the other Wall Street Journal story. Now, remember, the Wall Street Journal is already being sued by Trump for $10 billion over publishing a story exactly a week ago about a very, very weird birthday card from Trump to Epstein. And like I said last week, that's the kind of story that seemed like an opening move in a chess match. And I'm not sure if this story about the documents and his name is the second and final move or if there's more coming. But it seems like the Wall Street Journal has the sources on this one. Now, not long after the Journal put up their story, the New York Times put out one of their own, saying the same thing, that Trump's name and the names of other profile people had, quote, come up in the DOJ's re-examination of documents connected to the case that had not previously been made public. Now, that's important because earlier this year, Pam Bondi and the administration released binders of Epstein documents, which also contained Trump's name, to right-wing influencers who had been demanding more information. So what the Journal and the Times are talking about in these stories is stuff that was either uncovered later or was kept out of those binders that they handed out to prominent allies. And I want to be really clear about something here. These aren't reports in tabloids or blogs or purely partisan outlets. These are two corroborating pieces of reporting from the two most prominent newspapers in the country. And if you think they're biased, it's worth pointing out that their editorial boards fall on opposite ends of the political spectrum. I mean, the Wall Street Journal is owned by the same guy who owns Fox News. Also, these are allegations that you just can't print without a lot of vetting, unless you want to end up on the wrong end of a lawsuit, which they know Trump would file. So both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal know that. It's why it would seem, at least for the Journal, that they had this story ready to go last week. According to kind of how they lay this thing out, they said they asked for a comment from the White House on Friday last week, and then likely this story spent the weekend and the beginning of this week going through thorough editing checks and legal checks. That's how these things work in newsrooms. But beyond how the reporting of this works, these stories point to a real cover-up. Bondi said just 2 weeks ago that the files didn't exist. She put it in an official Department of Justice memo that's now a part of the National Archives forever. And then Trump said the files actually are real, even though Bondi just said they weren't. But Trump said that they were actually made up by the Democrats in an effort to damage him, even though it was his Justice Department the first go-round that put all these things together. All of it while knowing the files were real and his name was in them multiple times because he'd already been told by Pam Bondi 2 months ago. And then Senator Dick Durbin, who is a member of the powerful Senate Judiciary and Appropriations Committees, who is a respected member of the Senate on both sides of the aisle, came forward with whistleblower testimony and said this.
We were contacted by a highly credible whistleblower describing Attorney General's pressure on FBI to quickly review and produce more Epstein documents as promised. For 2 weeks in late March, the FBI assigned approximately 1,000 personnel in its Information Management Division and hundreds of additional agents from the New York field office to work 24-hour shifts to review and produce more Epstein documents. These officials were told to, quote, flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. Essentially, agents were pulled out of their field from their work combating narcotics and violent crime to review this mountain of documents. Other important FBI work was effectively shut down, according to the whistleblower.
1,000 FBI agents pulled off of their cases to comb through documents to flag where Donald Trump's name was? At the same time, the Department of Justice was offering buyouts to FBI agents and shrinking the force and putting out a budget that had a $545 million cut to the FBI and DOJ. So the question is, how long has this cover-up been happening? Since at least February, when Bondi said the files were on her desk, or when they gave out binders to right-wing influencers? Was there a plan during the campaign to scrub Trump from these files if he won, or at least figure out how often he was in them while he and people like J.D. Vance were out on the campaign trail demanding the release of the Epstein files to harm Democrats? What was their plan here? And did they think that voters who were very angry about this and believed in this thing would just let them not do this? We'll get to that in a second, because outside of the White House, Republicans in Congress voted twice in the run-up to this not to call for the release of the Epstein files. And then on Tuesday, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson announced that the House would be heading into its summer recess, so its summer break, early to avoid the pressure to have another vote on the Epstein files. Members of Congress will not be back at work until September. And Republicans are not happy about that. Mainly people like Thomas Massie from Kentucky, who the president has promised to oust from his seat next year because Massie, over the last few months, has been pretty outspoken against the president. Massie took to Twitter after Johnson let members go home, saying, at Speaker Johnson, why are you running cover for an underage sex trafficking ring and pretending this is a partisan issue? MAGA voted for this. And then here's Massie again, followed by Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ralph Norman, two hardline MAGA members of Congress, saying the files need to be released, talking to CNN.
We'll get phase 2 of the Epstein files because we'll get I believe every Democrat and at least a dozen Republicans who want transparency and justice.
So I doubt there's something there, but I'd rather just put it out there and put sunlight on it.
You know, with the Massey discharge petition, it's got some teeth to it, and it will pass.
I can tell you for the past, more than a week, the highest volume of calls into my office have been about Epstein. People want the information.
And what Norman said there is what the House Oversight Committee thought too, because in their last vote, before they go home for the summer, they subpoenaed the Epstein files. Now, that subpoena was also then amended, and it names people like Joe Biden and the Clintons and various Biden and Obama officials. It's part of a smokescreen the administration tried to run this week to put up a distraction from the Epstein files, which I'm not going to get into that here. I'm not going to waste your time on it because it all gets a little too confusing. But 3 Republicans voted with Democrats in that Oversight Committee vote. Here's one of them, Nancy Mace from South Carolina, talking to CNN outside the House elevators. You're going to hear them in the background.
Supporting the motion.
For sure. Yeah, and I'm going to amend the motion to protect the identity of the victims.
What do you think of the Speaker adjourning the House early to avoid this whole fight over Epstein?
This fight's coming no matter, this is here, and I've made it part of my life's mission to protect women and kids, and I think that, I'm ready to take this vote. I think we should take this vote and move forward, move this country forward, and the victims deserve justice, and people deserve transparency is what they want.
I want to say first here that this is a different Nancy Mace than we've been seeing for the past, year or so. She was the one who wore a scarlet letter A on her chest. She's been doing a lot of MAGA drum beating, and this is a new, much more toned down version of her that, frankly, we actually were used to seeing before the 2024 election. But beyond just Nancy Mace here, what she said is the same thing that we've been hearing from other Republicans. And then Senate Democrats agreed with Republicans. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer in the Senate called for the release of the Epstein files just this morning.
Mr. President, today marks the first day of the House embarking on their Epstein recess. And already, the story Republicans hoped would quietly fade is growing louder by the hour. Just yesterday, the Wall Street Journal reported that Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice informed President Trump back in May that his name appears multiple times in the Epstein files. Let me remind my colleagues, only last week, Donald Trump told a reporter that Attorney General Bondi never told him his name was in those files. Now we know that this was a lie, plain and simple, a red-faced lie. Enough, enough. Enough with the hiding, enough with the excuses, and enough with the cover-up. The American people deserve transparency. They deserve answers. And there are massive questions here, not just for the president, but for the vice president, the attorney general, the FBI director, and Republican leaders in Congress. What's in the files? When did they learn about it? And how long have they been misleading the American people? So today, on the heels of Speaker Johnson fleeing town to avoid accountability and following this damning report from the Wall Street Journal, I am calling on the administration to provide a closed-door briefing to all senators on the Epstein files. The Senate deserves to hear directly from senior administration officials about Donald Trump's name appearing in these files and the complete lack of transparency shown to date.
So, pretty much Congress, across the board, either doesn't want to talk about this thing or thinks that these things need to be released immediately. And if that's the level of breaking with Trump that we are seeing in Congress, where people's livelihoods, and if you ask some of them, maybe their actual lives are at risk for disobeying Trump, the fallout around the country is worse. Recent polls show that many Americans, including Republicans, are increasingly angry with Trump over not releasing these files. A new Quinnipiac poll found that 63% of Americans disapprove of the way that Trump is handling the Epstein files scandal, and just 40% of Republicans approve of how he's handling it. A new Reuters Ipsos poll found 54% of Americans disapprove, and only 35% of Republicans approve. And those are low numbers for any president. But for Donald Trump, with a party that he's nearly had complete control over for almost a decade now, those low approval numbers are practically unheard of. And I know that there are a lot of people out there saying that, well, Trump voters always find a way to come back. And that's largely been true in the past, or that people have short memories and we're more than a year away from the 2026 midterms. I would also agree with that. But this issue of this elite pedophile ring is a major motivator for a lot of Republican and Trump voters. They really believed in some sort of deep state elite cabal of people who were harming kids, and that Trump was the only person who was going to root them out. And the way that the administration is behaving and the news of this week seems to betray that very idea. All right, so what happens next? Well, it looks like the administration is getting closer and closer to cutting a deal with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice. Last week, both Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy AG Todd Blanche started talking to Maxwell's attorneys about an interview. Blanche is meeting with Maxwell right now in a Florida jail as I'm recording this. And it's important to note that both Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche have been the president's personal attorneys in the past. Pam Bondi was also the Attorney General of Florida, who helped Jeffrey Epstein essentially cut a deal when he lived in Palm Beach, Florida, and she also likely knew Maxwell as well. And normally, those kinds of conflicts of interest would prevent a DOJ official from conducting an interview like this, because now it gets muddy about whether Todd Blanche or Pam Bondi will be acting as United States officials or allies of Donald Trump or even themselves. And also, Maxwell's case is currently on appeal before the Supreme Court, who has largely done the bidding of the president. And if they get word from the DOJ that Maxwell might be willing to give up something that might be favorable to Donald Trump so that the court doesn't have to face his political wrath, that could also create a conflict of interest. And to top it all off, Congressman Tim Burchett, a Republican, told reporters this morning that the administration may look into cutting a deal with Maxwell in exchange for information they like.
Government has said in its filings that they don't trust her because she's a liar.
No, she is a liar, and she's a dirtbag. And,
so then why subpoena her if you can't trust her?
Well, because the one thing we got holding over her head is if we find out she lies, she goes back to her original sentence. And that's looking at lifetime. And if she's looking at maybe parlaying this into reducing her sentence, then we could have some leverage there.
So what that is a Republican representative signaling he and the White House and his party might be open to reducing the sentence of a convicted child sex trafficker to help the president out of a scandal. For years, these were people who accused Democrats, Hollywood, business elites, journalists of covering up and being part of a vast conspiracy of child abuse or worse. They leaned into it. In interviews on conservative cable news, they raised money and won votes, promising to root out this evil from Washington. And now, when we learn that the call is coming from inside the House on this one, they're more than happy to try and say nothing to see here and use the leverage of the justice system and the White House to try and find a way to protect the same kinds of people they swore they would destroy. I've been covering politics for a long time, and I have never seen anything quite like this. All right. That is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications if you're a watcher on YouTube. As always, sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. It's just $5 a month. It's pretty cheap to get great access to a lot of great stuff. If you don't want to do that, I totally get it, but please share the show on social media and tag Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms. You can tag me too on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Grant Herms TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Herms, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.